Morning everyone. I'm John Townsend. I'm the Director of Corporate Information Services at Liverpool John Moores University, so hence like Richard I'm the mandatory middle-aged man. Sharlene Jobson is the head of JISC Advanced Nexus. What we're going to talk about here, I'll go through the title first, is Here, There and Everywhere. It sounds as though it should have a theme tune. It's actually spelt differently to the way it is in the programme, which is actually an error in the programme that we made, because if I go through the three sections, the here part of it is the Higher Education Achievement Report, which is a new and advanced way of making sure that students have a better record of what they've achieved during their higher education, rather than, and I'm probably being a bit unfair characterising it like this, but rather than a few module grades and a degree classification. So this is something that is quite important to students and is a great step forward. DARE is the Digital Academic Records Exchange, which is the main focus of this presentation, which is a, I believe, innovative and new way of enabling access to the HERE and other academic documents through the cloud and through web services. And everywhere is where Sharlene comes in, because this is the Nexus Enterprise Service Bus, which enables access to DARE through this kind of approach, but also will enable access to all kinds of other services as it develops. So, very briefly, and a bit like the last presentation, it's going to be a bit of a whistle-stop tour, because there's quite a lot to get through. Where DARE came from is in 2011, the Funding Council put some money forward for shared service and cloud initiatives. There's a whole range of these. I won't mention the rest, but one of the funded opportunities there was to develop secure digital services in the cloud. And this is what Project DARE was about. It's funded under the University's Modernisation Fund, and it was to develop cloud-based software as a service for delivering a range of academic documents, but focusing on the HERE as being one of the key documents. It was a 12-month project. Had a reasonable amount of funding. There was an awful lot to do in the 12 months, because the objectives were both to produce the operational service, so something that worked technically, but also to put in place the organisation to manage the service. And both of those looked as though they could be quite challenging. We had 7 partner institutions, and I'll come to who those were in a moment. And Digitary was the software as a service provider, and the chief executive of Digitary is in the room somewhere. Jonathan? I can't see him. He's over there. I can't see him. I'm blinded by the light. He's over there. And he's the person who can talk about the details of the online document management services that his company provides, which is really the core software for this. But we also, as I say, had to look at the other technical aspects. We had to identify the cloud provider where it was going to be hosted, and that has ended up being Ulcc with Richard's help. And we had to look at using an enterprise service bus. Nexus ESB as such didn't exist when we started the project. So this is something that was developed through a separate JISC project as we went through things. And I'm obviously very happy to say that at the end of the 12 months, we had a successfully tested solution. All of the 7 institutions involved ran through the tests and managed to produce a document. It wasn't all the HERE. Some of it's been transcripts, some of it's been other financial documents. They all managed to do that. And it's now available as an operational service, which I'll come to. And the link at the bottom is to the final report that went to JISC, which contains all the detail that I won't go into about lessons learned and the experience of running the project, which is quite interesting. Okay, this is, I was just going to use this slide. This is a slide that contains absolutely everything in the whole world in relation to this. But I decided it could be a little confusing, and I'd have to keep running over and pointing at things. But essentially, what it encapsulates, one of the key things here, which, as I say, Jonathan Dempsey from Digitary can say more about, is the triangle in the middle. Because what's important to understand from the student point of view is that, essentially, this is a means whereby a student would go to what would appear to be the university they've studied at, and they would request, for example, a higher education achievement report. That would actually not then be produced by that institution, saving the institution a lot of work and a lot of trouble developing that. It would actually be provided by the DARE service. The institution presents the data to the enterprise service bus, That is then transformed, presented to Digitary, and Digitary actually produces the secure document. And there is a very robust security arrangement that works with that. Some of the other things in this slide, you can see from top right-hand side shows you who the other institutions involved were. I won't read through that. The bottom left-hand side is about the governance structure that we're putting in the moment and where we'll be going in the future. And you can see there are various other people who've been involved in this. We have had support from HESA. We've had support from the Centre for Recording Achievement, who look after a lot of the lead on the HERE stuff. And we've had support from the Higher Education Degree Data Check, which I will also come back to. Essentially, this is the way it works from the institution's point of view. It's not from the student's point of view. So what you have across the top is the institutions that are currently involved as partners in the initial project. The different colours represent how they've chosen to interface with DARE, because the options are, you can develop your own web services. If you have the technical capacity, that's something that is fully an option for a university to do, and they can then connect to DARE that way and through the hosted ULCC service. But also there is the opportunity to use the Nexus Enterprise Service Bus, and I think one of the conclusions of the project is that we would recommend doing that. And this means that you can either have a local connector or you can use the web services via the Nexus ESB to get through to the DARE service, at which point I will hand over to Sharlene, who will say more on the detail of that.
Thanks, John. In terms of the next slide, we've got 4 use cases. One's Cranfield, the other DMU, LJMU, and SOAS. And what you have is the Nexus adapter, which reduces data aggregation and integration costs based on the ESB components, which are the Nexus Enterprise Service Bus components. They consist of a data services server, the governance registry and repository, the enterprise service bus, and the business services. From there, those are audit logged, and they handle errors and actual issues, and then feed up into the digitally secure documents element. So basically we have benefits, data aggregation, integration costs, audit logging, handling errors and issues, and simplifying integration.
So moving on to the lessons learned from this, and I can say a little more about some of these. What was discovered, I think, by a number of the institutions involved is that web services aren't quite as easy to do as you might think they would be. Certainly at LJMU, our view was that we could sort all this out in-house. We've got a reasonably large team. We actually changed our minds and decided to use the Nexus Enterprise Service Bus, and also, which is the advantage of having a dedicated team. In a university, it may be that you've got people who know about web services, who can do web services work. I don't think many universities have got the luxury of having a team whose focus is entirely on that. So the advantage of working with Nexus is that's what they do, and they can just give you advice on that area and just help you with that area. So that was extremely useful. One of the things that both the Funding Council and JISC wanted to achieve with the shared services in the cloud UMF-funded projects was to move institutions forward with engaging with new technologies and engaging particularly with new ways of delivering things. And I think it has been successful in this, because if you look at the final report, you'll see that institutions are saying that they'd looked at service-oriented architecture more than they had before. They'd looked at enterprise service buses. They had taken, and this is particular hobby horse of mine, they decided that taking an enterprise architecture approach was extremely useful. And I can go on about that for ages, but that's not the subject of this presentation. But in terms of understanding how all the things you've got fit together as a prerequisite for being able to share any of them or do any of them in different ways, I think an enterprise architectural approach is extremely helpful. There can be cost savings. There's some kind of controversy around this because there's different ways of modelling it. I mean, the theory is that within an institution, you have to do all this work yourselves, and it can't be replicated. And to an extent that might be the case if the HERE turns out to be a reasonably generic document which is standardised, then arguably doing it through a service like DARE would be the right way to go, because if everyone's got to produce the same thing, then why all do it separately? One of the things that was proven through the project is that out of the 7 institutional partners, we had 4 different student record systems, plus 1 institution that had an in-house student record system, and the service was proven to work with all of those. We didn't cover all the systems, and we'd have liked to, but I think covering that range means that it is easily transported to other systems and to other contexts. But in terms of the cost savings, I would confess at the moment that it is it's slightly speculative in that you're working on a principle of it probably costs this much to do this in a university now if you were doing it. But in relation to there, you're not already doing it, so it's a bit difficult to say what the saving would be. And equally, I think most people will be familiar with the fact that benchmarking in terms of what things cost at the moment is not exactly where it should be in universities. So when you say to a department, like say registry, what does it cost you to do this now? They probably don't know. And given that you haven't got that starting point, it's rather difficult to demonstrate savings. So we do have, with the help of Jonathan again, a very compelling 5-year cost-benefit analysis which proves immense savings. But I think it needs rather more work in the benchmarking area. Nexus ESB, I think one of the great things with this is if you go down the ESB route, you can go with the DARE service and you can use the ESB and you're then using it to use the DARE service, but there are other services that will become accessible through it. The principle of the way it works can be used for anything, and the Enterprise Service Bus, the Nexus product, will obviously gain more traction and become more useful. The more people use it and the more services are available through it. And there are already examples of other services.
There are quite a few others. For example, on SOAS, we've just completed some work around steerage, around administration registration, for student registration and enrolment processes. So there are a number of other areas that can be used in. It's not limited to DARE. It can be extended quite a lot across other processes too, and support you from that point of view. You can also do it locally for your back-end systems, as well as to the outside world to share more information, potentially with councils, transport companies. It depends entirely on what your needs are.
Okay. Undertaking a project like this, I mean, this probably is a complete truism and goes without saying, but it wasn't during the project, needs business and technical input. We had some institutions who thought, oh, this is a business thing, we'll put a business team on, and then found they hadn't got the technical side sufficiently engaged. We had other institutions said, oh, this is a technical project because it's web services, and they found they hadn't got the business side sufficiently engaged. So it really does have to be a partnership there. And, which was quite a surprise, the governance model has worked. We found that, as I say, it was surprising, that we got an agreement in place about how the universities were going to collaborate quite early on, and we stuck to it. And it went around all the universities, and it was a nice framework document, and everyone signed up to it reasonably straightforwardly. You do need a very clearly defined service delivery model, and one of the issues that we struggled with during the project was identifying who the service provider would be. We ended up selecting Digitary, the commercial partner, as a service provider. One of the main reasons for that is that, frankly, they're the people who know how the core of the service works, and they're the people who can provide the support. So if we put another mechanism in place to be the service provider, it would just have been a channel to the same people anyway. So it didn't really seem particularly worthwhile. Where it's going now, it's an operational service. We're in the middle of setting up a service advisory board, which will be made up of the usual great and the good from the sector. And the idea of that is that it will guide both the quality of the current service that's delivered and also where we might want it to go in future, because it has lots of future potential. We have obtained UMF funding for what is now known as DARE 2, so DARE becomes DARE 1, it's now DARE 2. There's 2 streams to this. One stream is to encourage institutions to take up the service, and there is a modest amount of funding available for up to 15 new entrants into the service. So if anyone's particularly interested, if they want to approach me, then we can talk about that. That's to try and get the kind of head of steam to make it more of an operational service and give it enough take-up to do that. It's contingent, which wasn't the case in DARE 1, because it couldn't have been, because the Nexus ESB didn't exist. The funding in DARE 2 is contingent on using the Nexus ESB, because JISC and HAFCA and ourselves very much want to promote the use of that. So it's contingent on taking that up. We're also looking at doing, via Nexus, integration with the HED, which is the Higher Education Degree Data Check, which is delivered by a body called Graduate Prospects, which is kind of a bit like DARE, but it's coming at it from the employers and third parties point of view. If you don't know about it, it enables, it's a service that will check on behalf of third parties that a student has actually got a particular degree. And it can also run through the ESB, and it's in a hosted environment and hosted at Ulcc, I believe.
Yes, it is.
So there's another one there. We're kind of trying to fill them up. See if we get there. And there will be new developments guided by the Service Advisory Board. There will be additional documents will come in that can be used. There will be multi-tenancy, which is, because I'm an IT director, is the extent of my technical knowledge. And Jonathan can explain what is meant by that if necessary. And what I put at the bottom is the different people that can be contacted if you've got any further interest in this.
May I also add that for all of us who are here today, Jonathan, John, myself, Jane Rowley, and Charles Gibbons, who is our Technical Design Authority for the Nexus development side of things, will all more than likely be standing around the ULCC stand. So if you want to meet with us there, please feel free to come and have a chat with us.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you.